So as somebody who's been very vocal about the fact that Naruto does in fact have plot holes and therefore has made several videos talking about those plot holes, nobody's gonna be surprised when I go out and say this isn't the perfect anime. However, over the course of these last couple of years and talking about this IP 5 times a week, my relationship and my understanding of this universe has changed. See, because at a certain point, when starting off as a Naruto YouTuber, I had an understanding of Naruto, but not to the level that I have today. See, I had read the manga, I had watched the anime, I knew the answers to the questions, but I hadn't dived deep conceptually into the universe. Figured out the motivations of key characters, figured out the underlying tones, figured out what could be plot holes and what couldn't, and also figured out just how powerful these characters truly are. But now, even though I talk about Boruto more than I talk about Naruto nowadays, you do what the numbers tell you to do, I feel as though I truly have the best ever understanding of Naruto I've ever had, which is why I have a much different relationship with the concept of plot holes in Naruto than I used to. See, because when I started as an anime content creator over 3 years ago, I, like so many other websites and content creators that need to endlessly put out anime-based content, would say things like, oh, Obito is always using a Sharingan, but he never went blind. What's happening there, Kishimoto? But as my knowledge and my appreciation for the universe has grown, a lot of these so-called plot holes just aren't. And thus today I want to talk about some of the most widely talked about plot holes in Naruto and debunk them. Because while there is a lot of things wrong with the Naruto manga and anime, Madara's entire plan, Sasuke summoning Garuda to the lava dimension, Yagura being placed under Genjutsu, and so much more, these are very rarely the plot holes that you see anybody talking about as it pertains to Naruto. Because ironically, these are the plot holes that require a deep and rich understanding of how Naruto works. And while these are technically plot holes so far as canon information that we have, a lot of those plot holes, like Yagura being placed under Genjutsu, do have possible explanations. And thus, as I've moved forward with my knowledge and understanding of this universe, I've realized that even the most concrete plot holes do have a possible explanation. Except for Madara's entire plan. That's still asinine. So today I hope to go through some of those plot holes and provide unto you their explanations. So the next time that somebody tells you Naruto is filled with plot holes, you can show them this video, or you can steal my takes and pretend they're yours. As long as you view the video at least once, I'll be happy. Because today we're talking Naruto's biggest plot holes debunked. But before we get to debunking anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you love the idea of me bunking or debunking plot holes from your favorite anime and manga, go ahead and follow my other channel, The Weeb Commander, where instead of talking about Naruto and Boruto, I talk all other anime and manga. Or if you just love the idea of me talking about anime and manga, go ahead and follow my anime podcast, Talkers Anonymous, where me and Danny Mata break down everything that happened this week in anime and manga. It's available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Or if you want to see me live, pop on down to Houston, Texas this Memorial Day weekend to see me at Comic Palooza, where I'm going to be chatting about Hunter x Hunter, Naruto, and how to become an anime YouTuber. But before we talk about all that, today we got to talk about our favorite recurring sponsor to the page, Raycon. So you might have heard me talk about Raycons in the past and thought, oh, those earbuds that are half the price of the competition still somehow have the same audio quality? Yeah, okay. But let me tell you right now, as a massive music lover, I can hear no difference between my everyday earbuds and the rest of the competition. And they aren't lying when they say these come in at half the price. And when you consider the fact that the previous generation of Raycon's everyday earbuds sold over 3 million pairs, it's clear they were a fan favorite. But if you haven't jumped onto the Raycon bandwagon yet, well, now's the perfect time, because Raycon just launched the upgraded version of their best-selling everyday earbuds. And this new generation of earbuds has everything that you loved from the previous ones. But now they're weatherproof and sweat resistant. And when you sweat as much as I do when you work out, that's big news. And this new generation of earbuds has a quick charge function, ensuring that you spend even less time than you already did with dead earbuds, which was already minimal because of Raycon's incredible battery life. But if you want to know why I truly adore Raycons, it's because they're comfortable and they don't fall out at all. Doesn't matter what you do. You can go to a heavy metal concert, you can headbang all day, not a single wiggle. Look at my hair. Still in. And listen, I have other earbuds, but those earbuds fall out of my ears on runs or when I'm working out at the gym because of how much I sweat. These never fudge. So when I want to listen to Otaku's Anonymous at the gym, Raycon is my only option. So what are you guys waiting for? Click the link in my description or go to buyraycon.com/nchammer23 to get 20% off your order plus free shipping. It's time you heard me loud and clear and never worried about me falling out of your ear. So when compiling a list of the biggest and most talked about plot holes in all of Naruto, one has to frequent all the usual ranking sites. CBR, Screen Rant, Ranker, and so on and so forth. And while I was going across all these websites trying to pick which plot hole was worse than what other plot hole and what plot hole deserved to be talked about, I decided that there's so many plot holes that people talk about in Naruto that if this video does well, I could just do multiple parts. And thus, instead of trying to cherry pick individual plot holes drawn up by different websites and different Reddit threads and compile them all into a list and see how often they're all brought up across all these different forums, I figured I'd just tackle this one website at a time. And here's the thing, every single one of these websites for some reason decides to do 15 plot holes. And by and large, the plot holes are usually different. So today we're going to be tackling an article written by CBR, who does some very good reporting, and this article isn't necessarily bad reporting. It's just when you work in this space, you gotta put out content, and this is good content that people are gonna click on. So if you got two screens and you want to do some reading along with me, the article we're gonna be tackling today is 15 Naruto plot holes that were never resolved. And trust me when I say, pretty obviously, a lot of the heavy hitters, plot holes you've heard about up until this point are on this list. Now that I've looked at all these lists, a lot of the plot holes that people bring up surrounding Naruto aren't really plot holes. It's just kind of like, I didn't like that, and therefore it's a plot hole. A plot hole, moving forward, in my definition, is something that has no logical explanation. Being confused by something doesn't make it a plot hole. But enough of the semantics and the rules breakdown, let's get into this list, because there is 15 plot holes to get into. So coming in at number 15, we have Sakura's development stopped for no real reason. This plot hole essentially states that post-time skip, Sakura in early Shippuden was very clearly making some steps towards progress, as she played a central role in the battle against Sasori alongside Granichio. On top of that, it was revealed that she had trained with Tsunade for 3 years during the time skip, and thus, people were optimistic about her getting more powerful. But then, in the middle of Shippuden, for some reason, Sakura's progress just kind of halted. And objectively, this is true. Kind of. See, well, yes, the middle of Shippuden sees massive upgrades for both Naruto and Sasuke almost constantly, as Naruto gets Sage Mode and unlocks the Rasen Shuriken and gets KCM-1, and Sasuke gets his MS, and then his EMS, and then a Rinnegan. But while Sakura doesn't have these incremental upgrades that go alongside the other members of Team 7, what she does have is a massive reveal in the War Arc that she's now able to use the strength of 100 seal, something that she had been working on and storing chakra for years. And while the reveal of the strength of 100 seal does not put Sakura on equal terms with Naruto or Sasuke, she does enter into the battle against Kaguya as the only person in Team 7 without Sage of 6 Paths chakra and lands a hit on Kaguya, which others will say is a plot hole because Kaguya, who has a Byakugan, should have been able to see Sakura. But it's important to note that the Byakugan has a blind spot and that Sakura attacks from that blind spot. For those of you who don't remember, the Byakugan has a blind spot that peeks out above the second vertebrae in your neck. This is why Kidomaru in the battle against Neji was trying to fire arrows into this blind spot. And Sakura is aware of this blind spot. She's a medical genius who's been running alongside Neji and Hinata for a long time. And if Kidomaru knows about the Byakugan blind spot, then we can safely assume that Sakura does. And thus Sakura went into a battle against a literal god without the boost that everybody else on her team got, and still was the only reason Naruto and Sasuke were able to seal her in the first place. So while yes, I will agree that Sakura doesn't get as many incremental upgrades as Naruto or Sasuke does in the middle part of Shippuden, the idea for Sakura was never to have her be some kind of godbuster like the two of them. On top of that, her ability to collaborate with Tsunade to summon more of Lady Katsuyo onto the battlefield of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War was the only reason that only 20,000 shinobi died in the Shinobi Alliance. One of those shinobi very much being Tsunade, who Lady Katsuyo literally pieces back together. Coming up at number 14, we have Danzo could have easily attacked the Hidden Leaf earlier. Now, attack is kind of a loose term here, because essentially what Danzo does to Konoha is that he tries to cede control of it after Tsunade goes into a coma after the pain assault. And the line of logic here is that Danzo could have done this immediately after Hiruzen's death. So why did he allow for Tsunade to be elected when he could have just taken over the village right then and there? And once again, on a base level, this theory is correct. It is founded in a kernel of truth. After the Konoha crush, Konoha was weak, and Tsunade was nowhere to be found. This would have been a fantastic time for Danzo to sweep in and take over the village. So why didn't he do do it. Well, one, probably because Danzo didn't really exist as much of a character in Kishimoto's mind at that moment, but two, if you want an in-universe explanation, there was other more liked options out there outside of Danzo. See, while sure, the two elders that sit on the Konoha Council, Koharu and Homura, did like Danzo and were just as evil as him the majority of the time, the election of Hokage is a tricky spot because while we've seen Hokages selected by the Konoha Council, we've also seen Hokages selected by other Hokages, and we've also heard that the Hokage has to be the most powerful person in the village. So while sure neither Jiraiya nor Tsunade were in the village or even wanted to be Hokage, they were considered war heroes, were publicly adored, and would fill the role of Hokage well. While Danzo, who spent the majority of his life operating in the shadows and therefore the spoils of war that he had won for Konoha were entirely unknown to the public in large, didn't necessarily hold the same level of sway as Tsunade or Jiraiya with the Konoha Council or the Konoha masses. On top of this, it's important to note that the way that Danzo was planning on acquiring power was through the usage of Kodo Matsukame, as is evidenced by the fact that he used Kodo Matsukame on Mifune to convince all of the other Kage to elect Danzo as the leader of the Shinobi Alliance, which would have cemented him as the Hokage even if Tsunade had woken up. However, it's also important to note that the Byakugan literally comes from Konoha, and just one activated Byakugan is all it took for Danzo's plan to be foiled. So if Danzo was planning on taking over Konoha using the Kodo Matsukame, it's a possibility he understood that if he used it, it might blow back on him, and thus he would have to wait to use Kodo Matsukame in an advantageous time away from Konoha. And thus Tsunade falling into a coma and then a 5 Kage summit being called away from Konoha was the perfect time for him to make his move. You know, as long as Al wasn't there. But enough about Danzo, let's talk about the group that he formed, because coming in at number 13, we have the Akatsuki. Served very little purpose, and their role was never fully explained. See, now this is not a plot hole. This is bad writing.
Nick, what do you mean? The Akatsuki's one of the coolest villain groups in all of anime. That's not bad writing.
Listen, the number one sign of bad writing is if people who only interact with the IP once go, what's going on here? See, obviously I have a biased opinion of the Akatsuki because I've done deep dives into every single one of them. But yeah, to the average consumer, the Akatsuki's role and mission is foggy at best. And that's because every single member of the Akatsuki joined the Akatsuki for a different reason. See, while yes, it's generally understood even by the most casual Naruto fan that the Akatsuki's goal was the achievement of the Eye of the Moon plan. But most people go so far as to say that Obito didn't necessarily need the Akatsuki for the achievement of the Eye of the Moon plan. Obito, at genuinely any point in the story, could have pulled up on any Jinchuriki, beat them in battle, and then dragged them back to the Ghetto Mazo. So why did he need the Akatsuki? Well, one, because it's easier to not do all the work yourself, and two, because the extraction of tailed beasts is incredibly difficult. It took 9 members of the Akatsuki, all who were high-level shinobi, 3 whole days of constant effort to extract a tailed beast from a Jinchuriki. There's a fair amount of possibility that Obito wouldn't be able to do it by himself. I mean, think about it. When did Obito attack Minato and Kushina in order to set Kurama free? On the night that Kushina was set to give birth, because the seal keeping Kurama inside of her was at its weakest that night. Obito planning an entire assault to get some of the strongest people in history because the seal was weak at that point tells us basically everything we need to know about his ability to crack a Jinchuriki seal. And thus, while from a we saw it perspective, yes, the Akatsuki accomplished very little, they did track down, kill, and extract the tailed beasts from 7 Jinchuriki. And yeah, all of them died, but they had also all accomplished everything that Obito needed from them. But then why did the Akatsuki form in the first place? Well, because every individual member of the Akatsuki had their own reason for wanting a peaceful, idyllic world. And I'm not going to go into each and every single one of their reasons because I've done a 30-minute breakdown on every single member of the Akatsuki in my You Know Nothing series. But enough about dead people, let's talk about more dead people, because coming in at number 12, we have Neji's death could have easily been avoided, which is also not a plot hole. It's just a aspect of the story you didn't enjoy. Of course, Neji didn't have to jump in front of sticks, but he did. But the plot hole aspect of what's being talked about here is that Neji is a genius shinobi who should have been able to deflect these incoming projectiles. I mean, after all, we've seen Neji deflect hundreds, if not thousands of projectiles in his battle against Kidomaru, use rotation constantly to deflect projectiles coming from all directions, and so many other very impressive Byakugan-related feats. So why did Neji, a genius Byakugan user, need to use his torso to stop these giant splinters? Well, one, if you've watched Neji's death scene enough, you'll know that literally just before he dies, in response to the onslaught of fence posts being fired all across the battlefield, Neji says, "There's so many, my rotation can't keep up." On top of this, at this current moment, Naruto wasn't handing out version 1 cloaks. And if you remember anything about rotation, you'll remember that it is massively chakra depletive. Okay, well then why didn't he just use Gentle Fist to redirect the giant splinters? Well, mostly because Gentle Fist isn't that strong. We've literally never seen a Byakugan user do that. Hinata uses Air Palm, Hayashi uses Vacuum Wall, all done very specifically to not make contact with the giant woodies. But if you know anything about the Byakugan, you'll know things like Air Palm and Vacuum Wall are not continuous strike attacks. And there was 3 wood projectiles heading towards Hinata and Naruto. But Neji's capable of using Air Palm, isn't he? Yeah. He is. So could he possibly have used Air Palm 3 times before those world's biggest sewing needles hit Hinata? Maybe, but Hinata had already very clearly decided to put her life on the line for Naruto, and thus Neji possibly decided to do the same. Now, the reason that I say possibly is because right before Neji's death, one of the world's biggest rudimentary spears knocks off his headband, revealing his curse seal. Now, beauty is not the right word. Now, the agony of how the Hyuga curse seal works is that Hyugas from the side branch family are able to be controlled by Hyugas from the main branch family. And who else is on this battlefield with Hinata and Neji other than Hayashi, Hinata's father, the head of the Hyuga clan, who also, right before Neji decided to become the world's first leaking pincushion, noticed that his daughter was about to give her life for Naruto, which wouldn't be great for the Hyuga clan considering the fact that she is the heir to the Hyuga clan. And thus, if you want to get really granular and dark with it, there's a possibility that Neji was forced to jump in front of the wood that was meant for Hinata so that she could catch the wood that was meant for her from Naruto a little bit later. Because one of the first theories we ever made on this channel was the fact that Hayashi Hyuga actually orchestrated not only Neji's death, but also the birth of Naruto and technically Himawari. Maybe we should retouch on that one. That one was fun. But enough about plot holes we can easily debunk, because coming up at number 11, we have the Eye of the Moon plan was flawed from the start, which some uphill sledding if you want to try and debunk it. See, here's the thing about the Eye of the Moon plan. Every individual person who's invested in making it a possibility's rationale for wanting it to happen makes sense. Madara wants to live in a world where Chiha and Senju don't have to battle and wants to find true peace. Obito was sick of the needless death in the ninja world and therefore wants to live in a place where that can be eradicated, and so on and so forth. However, the plan itself is stupid. See, Obito himself admittedly wants the Eye of the Moon plan to happen so no more needless death happens. Except if the entire world is under a genjutsu, everyone will die eventually. In like 3 days, actually.
But Nick, the world tree wraps everybody up.
They didn't know that was gonna happen. The whole idea was just to bounce a genjutsu off the moon that would put everybody in paradise. But like, the human body can only survive 72 hours without water. On top of that, if you want to get further into it, Madara's idea of brainwashing a child, unplugging himself from the Ghetto Mazo, and just hoping one day either Obito or Nagato would give up their life to bring him back to life when he would be brought back to life as an old man with no ability to impact any change on the upcoming war whatsoever, is asinine. And without Kabuto literally bringing him back, him breaking out of Edo Tensei, and Kabuto giving him a perfect body, it shouldn't have worked out for Madara. This one can't be debunked. This is the one good plot hole in Naruto. There's more than this one, but this is the one. Genuinely, if you can find an in-universe way to explain why Madara approached the Eye of the Moon plan the way that he did, I'll listen. But for the moment, I got nothing, which is why we're moving on to number 10, which is one of the most talked about ones you'll hear in any Naruto forum, Naruto discussion, panel about Naruto, or when a YouTuber's just yapping about Naruto on the interwebs. And that is the fact that Naruto failed the graduation exam thrice. And while a lot of people try to explain away this plot hole in different ways, it's important to, before diving into the possible explanation of this plot hole, to get the best understanding of how the Shinobi Academy works in Konoha. See, the Shinobi Academy in Konoha is a 5-year program, which means that the majority of graduates start when they're 7 to 8 years old, which then results in them graduating from the Shinobi Academy in the region of 12 to 13. However, that isn't necessarily the case for everybody, as people like Minato, Itachi, and Kakashi all graduated early because the Academy didn't really have anything to tell them. Before they were even Genin, they were Chunin level threats, and thus they were able to graduate in 1 to 2 years. However, it is noted in the Itachi light novels that Itachi was the last ever person to graduate early from the Shinobi Academy. And the only reason that Kakashi, Itachi, and Minato were able to graduate early from the Shinobi Academy is because, entirely contradictory to why Tobirama founded the Shinobi Academy in the first place, they wanted these children on the battlefield as fast as possible. Not great. And thus, some people will say that the reason that Naruto was able to fail 3 times but still graduate with people his age is because every single time Naruto was given a test, he failed. And thus, Naruto had to keep repeating years. Which would mean, to break it down in a simpler sense, Sasuke and Naruto entered the Shinobi Academy at the same time. But Naruto continually failed his first year while Sasuke and the rest of the Konoha 12 moved on to future grades. However, because of Naruto's explosive change in learning the multi-shadow clone jutsu and defeating a Chunin in battle, Naruto was allowed to skip a bunch of grades and rejoin the Konoha 12. However, this would technically put Naruto in the same category as Itachi, Kakashi, and Minato, who graduated from the academy early. But I don't necessarily subscribe to this theory. The theory that I subscribe to in order to answer this question is that Naruto was put in the Shinobi Academy earlier than 7 or 8. It's just a simpler explanation. As opposed to being entered into the Shinobi Academy at 8, Naruto could have been placed into the Shinobi Academy starting at 5. I mean, he was an orphan, living alone, not in the orphanage, of which Konoha has one. So as to why he wasn't there, that's a question you should actually be discussing. But it would make sense, in order to make sure that this child, who is basically a walking nuke, gets as much parental supervision as possible, that you would place them in school earlier than people who have actual parents. And thus Naruto failed the Shinobi Academy 3 times until eventually the Konoha 12 joined and he passed with them. But I'll admit that's just a theory that has no actual backing. So if you wanted to consider this one a plot hole, I genuinely couldn't hold it against you. But you know what I can't consider a plot hole? Something that was quite literally answered in a spin-off series. Which is why at number 9, we're talking about how Lee passed the Shinobi Academy exam. I mean, Rock Lee can't use chakra, right? So he wouldn't be able to create a clone of himself, right? Wrong. Kind of. We learned in Rock Lee's Ninja Pals that in order to pass the Shinobi Academy, he just sidestepped so fast he left a literal clone. Yeah, you heard me right. Shinobi Academy could use body flicker, but only to make one visual after image. That's how he passed through the Academy. And if any of you are gonna go, oh, but Rock Lee and his Ninja Pals isn't canon, grow up. If a piece of non-canon material answers a question that the canon material never gets to, it's canon. But it is a possible plot hole, albeit an answered one. But you know what isn't a possible plot hole? What's coming in at number 8? Which is Sakura continued to love Sasuke, which, not a plot hole, just writing you don't like. And listen, it's writing I don't like. But the writer goes on to say that we as Naruto viewers and readers were never given a good reason why Sakura was in love with Sasuke. Still, after all the things she did to him, which once again isn't a plot hole, it's bad writing. And thus I really can't debunk it necessarily, but if I was gonna debunk it, I would say that Sasuke showed care and affection towards Sakura in the beginning of the story, and that her yearning for Sasuke to come back to the village and come back to her is no different than what Naruto does. Like, Sasuke is no worse to Sakura than he is to Naruto, but people only judge Sakura for it. Let's move on to things that could be actual plot holes if they didn't have an explanation, because coming in at number 7, we have one of the most talked about plot holes in all of Naruto history. Obito never went blind despite his continued use of his MS, which could absolutely be a plot hole if it didn't have a very clear and obvious explanation. C1, not every single MS makes the user go blind at an equal rate. It's clear that things like Amaterasu and Kagutsuchi actually make you go blind much further than the usage of Kamui, as we saw Sasuke already starting to deal with blurriness just after his battle against Danzo, while Kakashi doesn't begin to lose sight in his Kamui eye until the war arc. But the only person who uses their Kamui more than Kakashi is Obito, so why did he never go blind? Well, half of his body is Hashirama cells, and it's the half that Sharingan is on. Hashirama's life force was so incredibly powerful that he had an automatic healing factor that was comparable to mitotic regeneration, all without ever needing to make an actual hand sign to heal. Now, the healing levels that mitotic regeneration offer are so high that Sakura has immediately regrown lost arms, been punched directly through the chest with a tailed beast tail, and then sprinted down the tail to get to the person using it. And Tsunade was able to use her mitotic regeneration in combination with Lady Katsuyo's healing to literally put 2 sections of her back together. In fact, Madara uses Hashirama's healing factor to recover from Might Guy's Night Guy, a kick that was so fast that it quite literally bent space-time. So yeah, it can heal a little bit of damage you're doing to your MS. But let's stick with Obito here, because coming in at number 6, we have Obito should have died but didn't, which is kind of teetering on the edge of is a plot hole, isn't a plot hole. See, Obito surviving a myriad of different experiences that would have killed the average person isn't necessarily a plot hole, it's plot armor. And you could say the same thing about the majority of the important characters in Naruto. But the writer of this article goes on to say that Obito should have died when he was crushed by rocks, but didn't, which I guess, like, sure. Like, it's not like he was in a great situation. Kakashi and Rin weren't strong enough to lift all the rocks off him, and it did literally cost him half of his body. And if Madara hadn't shy-haluded over to his body, grabbed it, and then grafted half of Hashirama's cells onto him, he would have died. So, like, yeah, he shouldn't have survived, but that's where Madara comes into play. The article then goes on to say that Obito survived the Bijou extraction and a fight against Minato, which, like, yeah, he does, but we also have explanations for both of those things. See, assuming that Minato was able to place a flying Raijin mark on Obito, which we know he was able to do, that meant that if Minato had survived the night of Naruto's birthday, at any point he could have arrived back on Obito's location and killed him. But Minato didn't survive Naruto's birthday, so that wasn't necessarily an issue. Oh, Nick, well then why wasn't Minato able to jump to Obito's location when he came back to life? Well, it's been shown that the only thing that was ever able to remove a flying Raijin mark was you becoming a Ten Tails Jinchuriki. Okay, Nick, then how did he survive the Bijou extraction? Black Zetsu literally says it to him. It's also why he was able to survive Rinne Rebirth. Black Zetsu binds himself to his body and keeps Obito alive.
But okay, Nick, well then what about when Black Zetsu is removed from Obito's body?
Naruto heals him using his Sun Seal, which is a plot device, but not a plot hole. Also, it's implied that Naruto healing Obito with his Sun Seal is a temporary fix at best. Also, after Obito dies, the reason he's able to pass down his DMS to Kakashi is because he still has Six Paths Chakra, which Kakashi uses as a unrechargeable battery to power up his DMS mode, and thus to assume that the Six Paths Chakra he still had pumping through his body was keeping him alive up until that point isn't crazy. So yes, did Obito have an insane amount of plot armor? Absolutely, but so do most mainish characters in anime. Both Naruto and Sasuke have a fair amount. But let's move on to number 5, which is one of my favorite plot holes in Naruto to talk about, that nobody ever recognized Naruto to be the son of Minato and Kushina. And I very recently just changed my opinion on this plot hole, and on Superman's hidden identity. See, as all of you know, when I film, I wear blue light glasses. I don't wear glasses when I'm out and about. Now, a lot of you who have spent literal weeks looking at my face might say, oh, this is not that big of a change. Especially when I'm wearing my clear frames, because I left my black frames somewhere. I don't know where they are. I have multiple times in LA at parties met people who were big fans of my channels. However, they didn't know I was me until we followed each other on Instagram. Because no glasses. In fact, I get noticed almost 2 to 3 times more at a con if I'm wearing my glasses as opposed to if I'm not. So this has given me a fair amount of perspective on the whole nobody ever figured out who Naruto was thing. But let's dive into it, because objectively it is kind of funny. Because the more you know about Naruto as a universe, the less it actually makes sense. See, if you've read the light novels, you know the reason that everybody knew that Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails is because Danzo leaked that information to everybody after Kurama destroyed the village, so everybody in the village could come together in their hatred of a baby, because Danzo believed that Konoha needed a great unifying force. However, how nobody either wanted to or did figure out that the child who had Kurama in him was the child of Minato Namikaze, when Minato Namikaze was married to the only remaining Uzumaki in the village, Kushina Uzumaki, and Naruto would run into every situation and proclaim himself Naruto Uzumaki, while also happening to look exactly like his father. And yet nobody seemed to question the fact that Naruto seemed to appear right when Kushina and Minato died, and that Naruto had the face and Uzumaki last name of his mother and the hair of his father. And thus it's widely assumed that Naruto would have gotten a whole lot more in the realm of respect if people had realized that he was the Hokage's son. And thus the level of hate and vitriol felt towards Naruto proves the fact that nobody ever figured out that he was Minato's long-lost son. But here's the thing. We're assuming that everybody knew that Kushina was pregnant, which probably the fair-ish amount of people knew. Hiruzen, Minato, Fugaku, friends of the family. But if you've read the Minato one-shot, you'll know that Kushina, while the Jinchuriki of Kurama, was confined in a certain area where her seal, her 8 trigram seal, was the strongest. And while the general point of the Minato one-shot seems to be freeing her from this radius through the power of placing Minato, somebody she loves, within her 8 trigram seal, this means that for a large part of Kushina's life, she was a highly secretive person, somebody who was rarely seen by the Konoha masses. On top of that, it's not like Naruto is the only blonde in Konoha, and the Uzumaki haven't been gone that that long, as it's believed that the Uzumaki were wiped out after Kushina came to the village. Thus, the idea that there is still Uzumaki kicking about in a village that has Uzumaki temples isn't that crazy. On top of that, we're just assuming that people didn't know that Naruto was Minato and Kushina's son, which they could have known and just willfully ignored because they were more angry about what Kurama did to the village and their families than who this child's parents were. But I will admit, it is silly, and it is probably a plot hole. And what's even worse is that it's so simple to address. There could literally just be one scene where somebody's like, that's the demon fox, get him, and somebody else is like, no, don't hit him, he's the Hokage's son, and everyone's like, we don't care, he killed our families, and then boom, we're good. But then that would mean Naruto would know who his parents were, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. He could look up to his parents and still be just as excited when he met them. But that doesn't do as much in terms of a big reveal. But since we can't necessarily debunk that one in a way that satisfies the masses, let's move on to number 4, which is Hinata's fight with Pain needlessly risked her life. Isn't a plot hole. Well, I guess technically the way that it's approached is kind of a plot hole. See, the writer is essentially saying here that Hinata should have had bodyguards, that when Hinata went to enter into battle against Pain, she should have been flanked by other members of the Hyuga clan. And this is kind of a through line to a bunch of moments with Hinata throughout the story. See, because Hinata, for good chunks of Naruto's story, is the heiress of the Hyuga clan, the strongest clan in all of Konoha, and is therefore kind of Konoha royalty. Now, when Hayashi kind of gets sick of her weakness, he demotes her from heiress and promotes Hanabi, even though she now appears in Boruto to be the head of the Hyuga clan, and at this moment in time, in this battle against Pain, she was demoted from heiress, and therefore she was just kind of a regular main branch family member of the Hyugas. She is still the eldest daughter of the head of the clan, and before she jumps into battle against Nagato, she's seen with other members of the Hyuga clan. Now, be those members side branch family members or main branch family members, they should be dedicated to protecting Hinata, is at least what the writer says in this article. And while I kind of tend to agree, from like just a visual and narrative storytelling perspective, if Hinata was constantly flanked by guards every time she did something, she would be a non-character. Like what, are her guards gonna take the Chunin exams with her? Where were her guards when Neji was beating the hell out of her? Where were her guards in the 4th grade Shinobi World War? I guess you could kind of argue Neji was one of them, but still. And also, yes, it's important to note that at this point in time, Hinata was not the heiress to the head of the Hyugas. That was Hanabi, who was being protected. On top of that, Hinata, by the time that the Pain arc came around, was one of the most powerful Hyugas in the entire clan, as her twin Lion Fist is something that we haven't seen any other Hyuga use, and is possibly the strongest Gentle Fist technique we've ever seen. And if there's one core sentiment that runs through the entirety of Konoha, it's faithfulness to the village over the clan. This was the sentiment that the Senju tried to drill into the village by basically disappearing. And while the Hyuga definitely have not followed in their footsteps, 1, the Hyuga bodyguards who would have jumped down with Hinata would have been weaker than her, probably, and 2, they had other things to do, like not die like Hinata does. And one of those things might have been protecting the actual heiress of the Hyuga clan, Hanabi. But enough about Hinata, let's talk about some other people with some other weird eyes, because coming in at number 3, we have Itachi didn't kill Danzo when he had every reason to. This is getting tough because a couple of these I agree with. But if you were to hypothetically rally against the idea that Itachi could have killed Danzo whenever he wanted to, here's what you would say. Of course, Itachi identified Danzo as a legitimate threat to Konoha's safety, but Itachi also realized that if he were to kill Danzo, it probably would have sparked an internal conflict between the Uchiha and Konoha, something he was specifically trying to avoid. And since at the time that Danzo decided to kill Shisui and Itachi had already very clearly chosen the side of Konoha over their clan, Itachi possibly using Shisui's death at the hands of Danzo to start a conflict between the Uchiha and Konoha, when Shisui was literally the person who incentivized Itachi to join the Konoha side in the first place, would have been disingenuous to what Shisui actually wanted. On top of that, we're assuming that Itachi could have killed Danzo in his home court with the entirety of the route on his side. See, a newly minted MS Sasuke is able to kill Danzo, and to assume that a newly minted MS Sasuke is probably somewhere in the ballpark of strength as a newly minted MS Itachi, who literally got his MS on the night of Shisui's death, and therefore the night that people believed he would have killed Danzo, means that Itachi in a 1v1 probably would have struggled with Danzo. But a lot of you are probably saying at this point, Nick, Danzo didn't have any Sharingan in his arm, and therefore he wouldn't have had Izanagi to infinitely spam new lives. On top of this, Shisui literally tells Itachi right before he dies that internal conflict in Konoha will lead to other villages invading. So Shisui's last wishes to Itachi is peace for Konoha, not revenge. On top of this, Itachi understands after the assassination of his clan that Hiruzen no longer trusts Danzo and is gonna keep him in check. At least this is what Itachi thinks, because Hiruzen strips Danzo of his control over the root. This is why Itachi shows back up in Konoha after Hiruzen's death to tell Danzo he's still around and alive and that he can kill him if he ever lays his hands on Sasuke, which is why Danzo never tries anything with Sasuke.
But Nick, why didn't you just kill Danzo if you could kill him at any point?
Once again, home turf, and Itachi has chakra illness. Itachi doesn't necessarily have the chakra necessary to kill somebody who can come back to life 17 times. Itachi and Kisame versus Danzo and the entirety of the root in their backyard isn't a great fight. So, while I do tend to agree that Itachi should have killed Danzo, if you look at his core motivations, genuinely it wouldn't make sense. So let's move on beyond Itachi to number 2, which is Hiruzen didn't take care of Naruto like he promised. I mean, this one's easy, right? If you're pro Hiruzen like I am, you can simply say Hiruzen was too busy to keep an eye on Naruto. Hiruzen pretty much immediately after the loss of Minato had to deal with one of his students being revealed to be a mad scientist using humans to try and recreate the cells of the first Hokage, had to deal with the eradication of the Uchiha clan, realize that his right-hand man was the reason the Uchiha clan was eradicated, have his right-hand man constantly throw assassination attempts at him through the medium of the root that he's not supposed to be controlling anymore. And oh yeah, you didn't want to be in this role anymore anyways because you'd already been Hokage through 3 great shinobi world wars. But Nick, Hiruzen could have just assigned a Chunin to keep an eye on Naruto. Genuinely, how do we know that he didn't? Like what, Naruto had spoiled milk in his fridge and he lived alone? I mean, yeah, he was a punk kid. Having some Chunin around that he didn't want around probably would have just pissed him off. How do we know for sure that Naruto wasn't being watched by the powers that be in Konoha? Now, if you're not pro Hiruzen, you can just say he's a bad guy. He made a promise he didn't live up to. That's easy enough. It's not really a plot hole, it's just either him being busy or kind of being a bad dude. Like, people don't have to do everything they're gonna say they do. That's meant to inform to us, the reader, the content of their character. But enough about that crusty old man. Let's get to an even crustier and older woman, because coming up at number 1, we have the facts that Naruto and Sasuke killed Kaguya and didn't get karma markings. I think we can all understand that when Kishimoto first started the idea of Kaguya, the idea of karma marks didn't exist in his brain quite yet. As the first piece of Boruto teaser material he ever put out had Boruto having a KCM2 cloak, not a karma marking. But even if you don't want to look at the back end of it, the behind the pen aspect, there is a theory out there that instead of placing a karma marking on Naruto or Sasuke, Kaguya actually placed the karma marking on Sakura, just behind her strength of 100 sealed diamond, as the karma marking itself is also a diamond. However, it's also important to note the differences in situations between Kaguya and Momoshiki's defeat. See, Momoshiki was killed, full on dead, and Kaguya was sealed. But here's the thing, we don't necessarily know if that seal killed her or not. See, while technically the 4th data book did hint at the fact that Kaguya dies as a result of the 6 Master Baku Tensei in her own dimension, the data books have also said that Choji's human tank attack is the strongest ninjutsu move in all of Naruto. So you gotta take statements from there with a bit of a grain of salt. On top of this, there's plenty of theories out there that Black Zetsu was actually Kaguya's karma mark, which makes sense as Black Zetsu claimed to be the manifestation of Kaguya's will, which is in essence exactly what a karma marking is, just when applied to a human body. And when you consider the fact that it was Black Zetsu who punched a hole in Madara's body and manifested Kaguya, Black Zetsu being Kaguya's karma marking makes a fair-ish amount of sense. And what do we know about karma markings? When one of them manifests, all others disappear. And since Black Zetsu was thrown into the same 6 Master Baku Tensei as Kaguya, and therefore was manifested at either the time of her sealing or her death, it's safe to assume that you wouldn't be able to place a karma marking on anybody else. There's also the issue of compatibility. See, Momoshiki placed a karma marking on Boruto, but not Naruto or Sasuke. Now, while one could say this is because Boruto was the one delivering the final Rasengan, Naruto's chakra was a huge part of that, but Momoshiki had compatibility and interest in Boruto. It's a possibility that Kaguya didn't have compatibility with Naruto and Sasuke, as they were reincarnations of her literal children, who she also could have imprinted karma markings on in the first place. On top of that, Kaguya, if she does die in the 6 Master Baku Tensei, dies in a much different way from Momoshiki. She essentially becomes a massive gravity well that absorbs a moon amount of debris around her until eventually she's either sealed or killed. While Momoshiki was killed by a massive Rasengan from Boruto, meaning Boruto was much closer to Momoshiki than Naruto and Sasuke were to Kaguya. So yeah, neither of them ended up receiving karma markings for a possible litany of reasons. And with that, that's all 15 plot holes, 13 of which are pretty easily debunkable. I'm sorry, Madara's plan is stupid, and yes, people should have recognized Naruto. If you guys have an explanation for why people weren't able to identify Naruto, or an explanation as to why Madara's plan wasn't as dumb as I think it is, tell me in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please For me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. I'm gonna go play pickleball.